I'm bugged at my old man.
Murry Wilson was a man whose achievement in life was to sire 3 Beach Boys, then bequeath each of them a rich assortment of psychological disturbances. A man who berated people for being too tense, slapped them for being too scared, and belittled them for being weak. When his sons decided they wanted nothing more to do with him, he blamed it all on their mother for being too nice. But how did this gem of a man come to be? Murry Wilson was one of several people born in 1917. His family was poor and at one stage lived in a tent on a beach. His dad, a violent alcoholic named Buddy Wilson. If there's an ultimate villain in this story, maybe it's him, a man who hardly gave his son much guidance in the great dad stakes. Murry was interested in music from a young age and aspired to be a pop songwriter. In fact, he'd no doubt be delighted to know that an electric encyclopedia would one day list him as a songwriter, rather than what he really was, a fortuitous ejaculator. While no other man in history can claim discharge that produced a single Beach Boy, this man produced nothing but Beach Boys, 3 in a row, and it's only a shame that having spawned a hat trick, he didn't shoot for the glut. As it was, this mere trilogy of progeny would later necessitate the hire of Mike Love, as if the poor Wilson boys didn't already have enough on their plate. Murry met Audrey Neva Kortov at Washington High School. They graduated in 1935, and then, believing if they got married, they could be married, then they'd be happy, then we'd be happy, they got married in 1938. Unfortunately, they were wrong. Audrey would never be happy because she was married to Murry Wilson, and Murry Wilson would never be happy because he was Murry Wilson, something he would take out on the world forever afterwards. The 40s was the decade that saw Wilson gain 3 sons and lose an eye, the latter in an industrial accident, although Wilson took a philosophical view, realising he'd not so much lost an eye as gained a socket, an unnerving, gory cavity he could force his sons to stare into if they were enjoying life too much. The sons were sensitive Brian, rambunctious Dennis, and quiet Carl. He instilled his own love of music in them, although Brian was soon hearing in mono thanks to Murray's fists. One of their friends would later describe him taunting the boys mercilessly, but they would come to realise that when he was raging, the surest way to shut him up was singing close harmony, something that could reduce him to tears. He truly was a loving, violent, sensitive, awful man. In the 50s, he started a company based on a flawed acronym, but he kept up his interest in songwriting. He had minor success with a ditty called 2-Step Sidestep.
Took a man away, 2-step, sidestep.
But it was nothing much, and he carried a noxious mix of failure and entitlement his sons, especially Brian, would catch the sharp end of. The Wilson kids formed a group. One day, Murry came home from Mexican vacay to find them rehearsing and was halfway through casually hurling Brian against a wall when they managed to convince him to listen to their new song.
Surfing is the only life, the only way for me. Now surf, surf with me.
Now their music did more than briefly quiet the ever-present threat of violence. It got them a manager, Murry instantly appointing himself the job, saying, "Everyone else will screw you over." He worked hard for them, mortgaging his company to finance the group, getting them signed to Capitol Records, and providing discipline and drive. But such maniacal commitment never comes purely from love. It was thwarted ambition playing second life with his kids as avatars, a reference that wasn't even dated back then, and explains how angry he would get when the band did things like display agency or behave as autonomous beings. His control freakery extended to issuing $100 fines for drinking alcohol, for swearing, looking at girls or not smiling on stage, and even the good things he did, like having Brian start a publishing company, Sea of Tunes, to keep ownership of his songs, were ploys for the ultimate benefit of Murry Wilson. First, he told Brian that as the band's manager and as his father, he was entitled to 50% of the company's income. Just for the record, standard music industry practice is that managers get 20% commission. Fathers get 0. It only took a few months of bullying before Brian agreed. Evidently, this inspired Murray to really swing for the fences. After a further campaign of harassment, he got Brian to hand over the other 50% too. But this proud, honourable swindler of a man was just getting started. If hearing all this just makes you crave a flavour of the man at work, let's turn to the infamous Me Rhonda tapes.
Do you want to fight for success? I'll go all out.
No, I don't. We don't. No.
Son?
We would like to record under an atmosphere
you.
of calmness, and
I
you're
love
not
you, my
presenting
dear
that.
mother.
Just to bring us quickly up to speed, Murray spent their early success flipping between pride and fear. Chiefly, the fear that they might grow into confident, independent adults. To prevent this, he made sure that any kind word from him was offset by gales of criticism. He spent the I Get Around session calling Brian a loser, claiming to be the real talent in the family, and saying the song was no good. This was the record that became their first number one. In 1964, the band had enough and fired him. But the children of abusers tend to nurture forlorn hopes, and next year, Brian invited his dad to watch him produce Me Rhonda. He just wanted Murray to see what he could do and be proud. But instead, he was Murray.
What's the matter? You made too much money, buddy? No. Let's sing from your heart, so let's go.
The tape shows him taking over the session and sabotaging it, holding everything up with pompous nitpicking, then playing the just trying to help card when they get annoyed. At one point he claims, I'm a genius too. And this is certainly a virtuoso performance.
Fellas, quit screaming and start singing from your hearts, huh? You're doing fine now. Carl, ooh, you're come on. Dennis, you're flatting. Let's go. Let's roll. So you're big stars. Let's fight, huh?
He was a musician of bluster, a true maestro who could patronise, belittle and sulk in the space of a single boast. A real whiz who could take a victim from naught to prickly in 2 seconds flat.
Since you put me down,
Since you put me down, boo-dee-dee-ba-ba-dee-dee-ba-dee-da. Got it?
I got it, Murray.
A few minutes in, and Brian was already regretting his invitation, but he finally loses it when Murray says the words, as a team we're unbeatable.
As a team, we're unbeatable. Let's go. You're doing wonderful, Al. I'll leave, Brian, if you're going to give me a bedtime. Let's go. I don't care how many people are here.
This is how he treats his successful adult son in his own workplace, belittling him in front of colleagues and onlookers until he flips out, then acting like the wounded party. You can imagine anyone being driven to the edge of sanity after a lifetime of this treatment, but this stuff wasn't even the worst of it, just the seasoning he used to give his massive betrayals a robust kick. Murray would repeat this performance through the remainder of the 60s, showing up uninvited to sessions to be greeted with, "Hi Dad, great, you can help us out," when just before he'd stepped through the door they'd been saying, "Shit, it's Dad. There goes 2 hours." When Brian Wilson abandoned Smile, his father's was the voice he heard in his head, saying, "What's the matter, buddy? No guts? I told you this so-called masterpiece of yours was going nowhere." In 1969, Brian found out that Murray, convinced their value had peaked, was planning to sell all of his songs. Brian was outraged and in any case still owned half the company, but Murray, ignoring the legalities and his son's pleas, sold Sea of Tunes to A&M for $700,000. He never gave the band a penny, they never earned another cent in royalties, and he only had to forge Brian's signature to do it, who was devastated for months afterwards, driven deeper into drugs and paranoia. By the mid-90s, Sea of Tunes was valued at $40 million. A few months after the Me Rhonda session, he'd sent Brian an 8-page letter. The letter claims they grew not to like him, not because of all the shitty things he did, but because of their mother's interference and because phonies tricked them into it. He also wrote one to Dennis containing the line, "Breaking my camera was but another sign of your total failure on all levels as a son." Murry Wilson was like an air horn who took offence when people covered their ears. A man whose motto was never speak ill of the dad, who robbed his sons of the resilience they needed to handle fame, then rather than give support, made himself one of their chief adversaries, most likely causing the complete mental breakdown of one of them. Way to go, genius. When he died of heart disease in 1973, only Carl went to the funeral. And when Brian Wilson had children, he refused to be part of raising them. telling his wife, "I want you to discipline the kids. I'll do it, Ron." His memoirs would later contain the line, "When someone scares you so often, gentleness is its own kind of shock." Thanks for watching Superfluent. There's some Beatles content here, and here's a subscribe button. See you in a click.